The details of the Kris Dunn sign and trade have been finalized, and surprise, surprise, it involves Russell Westbrook again. The interesting part about it is that once again, Russell Westbrook will end up going to the Utah Jazz just to be bought out so he can join another team. If you're new to the channel, it's your boy Wraith Hoops. Go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on post notifications if you're into NBA basketball. I cover it as much as possible. With that being said, today we're going to be talking about the trade that landed, or should eventually land, Russell Westbrook alongside the one and only three-time MVP Nikola Jokic, and send Kris Dunn to the Clippers, allowing him to obtain the payday that he has so greatly desired. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this one. Kris Dunn has finalized his signing trade that will give him a 3-year, $17 million deal in exchange for Russell Westbrook, who will be coming over for a buyout situation, along with a second-round pick and cash. The simple fact of the matter is Russell Westbrook ended up taking a pay cut to stay with the Clippers originally, since he ended up leaving the Lakers, and he didn't really get what he wanted out of it. They were supposed to be one of the best teams, and it just quite frankly didn't happen with the guys that were there. They ended up losing out on Paul George for literally nothing, creating the worst possible trade in NBA history, bar none, considering the fact that they ended up giving Danilo Gallinari several draft picks, along with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who was a borderline MVP player last year, and things just didn't end up panning out well. So here Russell Westbrook is, after Paul George, who was apparently the person that he was closest to on the team, not James Harden, ironically enough, ended up leaving for Philadelphia. Well, Russell Westbrook doesn't really see any real reason to still be there because there's nothing that's really going to happen there. And he also wants an increased role, which is completely understandable considering the fact that when you take into account how he was with the Oklahoma City Thunder and the insane usage rate that he had, but coming over to the Clippers, he increased his defense. He increased his off-ball capabilities. He ended up being still an effective playmaker, but more decisive with what he does with the ball instead of just taking a million dribbles. And he also spent a lot of time coming off the bench as well, which he will inevitably see if he does end up going to the Denver Nuggets like we expect him to. But he could also find his way into the starting lineup depending on how good his defense is, because that has been a very sneaky part of his game that he has really worked on these past 2 years with the Clippers. That said, he averaged 11.1 points, 5 rebounds, 4.5 assists, 1.1 steals, 0.3 blocks, to go along with shooting splits of 45.4% from the field, 27.3% from three-point range, 68.8% from the free throw line, and total true shooting of 51.4%. This was only in 22.5 minutes. He is also 35 years old right now and will be 36 at the early stages of next season, so it stands to reason that while he does have some athleticism left in the tank, there's not too many bright years left of Westbrook available, and that's why he's probably going to be coming off the bench for whichever team he ends up going to, even though Woj allegedly tells us that it will almost certainly be the Denver Nuggets. Kris Dunn, on the other hand, is a younger player, 30 years of age at the current moment, and he will be 30 until later in this season upcoming. And he also has a higher motor when it comes to the defensive side of the ball. He still has a high playmaking sense, obviously not as high as Russell Westbrook. And he is a better shooter, though he shoots a lower volume of total shots because that is what his role required of him with the Utah Jazz. He, in total, put together 5.4 points, 2.9 rebounds, 3.8 assists, 1 steal, 0.4 blocks, and shooting splits of 47% from the field, 36.9% from three-point range, 68.8% from the free throw line, and 54.6% true shooting in just 18.9 minutes. His minutes were up and down. Some games he played, some games he didn't, not necessarily because of injury, but because they were allowing guys like your Keontae Georges, your Jordan Clarksons, your Colin Sextons, a bunch of different guys to get some burn and see how things were going to work out. And then eventually, when they were winning games, it was in a lineup that had Keontae George actually being a bench player. You saw Kris Dunn starting at the point guard spot. You saw Colin Sexton at the 2-guard spot. You saw Simone Fontecchio, who eventually at the deadline got traded to the Detroit Pistons and re-signed at the end of the season. And then you also had Larry Markkinen and John Collins or Walker Kessler. This was a effective lineup, but it just wasn't effective enough. And so they decided to blow things up at the trade deadline and continue to move things on and move on from certain players when the offseason came. This was unfortunate because Kris Dunn was definitely a fan favorite. He didn't have numbers that jumped off the page, but when you needed a play to be made at the point of attack on defense, he was the guy that made it. When you needed somebody that was going to make the right decision on offense and set the table for guys like Larry Markkinen, who had most of their three-point attempts off of assists, he was that guy. And he also served as a mentor for the young guys like your Bryce Sensabauls and your Keontae Georges, even though Keontae could have stood to develop a little bit more of his prowess, maybe from a defensive standpoint or just a proper playmaking standpoint. But nevertheless, Kris Dunn was there and he did his role to the best of his ability, similarly to Westbrook, who had a fair share of criticism come his way. And despite it all, he stood through all the test of time that came and never once backed down when the opportunity would have presented itself to him. Nevertheless, I believe that these two gentlemen deserve all the best, and I am very happy that Kris Dunn is going to have the opportunity to get paid, and Russell Westbrook will also in a certain way as well. Remember, with the fact of it being a buyout most likely, Russell Westbrook will end up getting that $4 million from the Utah Jazz, and then when he goes over to the Denver Nuggets and signs his new contract, he will get extra money on top of that to solidify what his new deal is. This is significantly better considering the fact that he was a free agent previously with the Clippers, and he ended up opting into the deal so that he could obtain the $4 million, because originally he just would have had to walk that $4 million off and just go with the base contract that he got from the team that he wanted to go to. The issue with that is the fact that he already took a significant pay cut when he came to the Clippers, and he said, you know what, I like what we're building here. Let me go ahead and take a little bit of a dip just so we can keep the guys together, just so everybody can stay happy, everybody can stay paid, and I can stay on this team because I feel valued. And they did right by him and allowed him to be traded so that he can be eventually bought out and sent to a team that he actually wants to. The interesting part is going to be seeing how he fits in with Nikola Jokic, because he has spent a lot more time off the ball. And while he does have an elite level of playmaking that's probably above Jamal Murray's, he might not necessarily get to start unless his defense ends up being completely consistently up to standard as it was in certain stints during different playoff runs that they had in the past. I believe that he's capable of doing it, but it comes down to how bad does Russell Westbrook want it. And considering the level of energy and hype that he brings about himself, I think that he's going to be very good at what he does. When it comes to the Utah Jazz, there's not really much of a positive that came out of this one, except for the fact that you will continue to have the tanking roster that you originally had. You did manage to get a second round pick swap, and obviously there's cash involved, so that's always pleasant, especially if you do plan on keeping Larry Markkinen and restructuring his contract to extend him out, because some of that money will end up going his way. How much money it is, we don't entirely know, but anything is better than nothing when it comes down to these sorts of things. Either way, I am appreciative of both of these guys' services when they played for their respective teams, and I believe that it will be in our best interest to continue watching them with their respective rosters as they continue to move forward. I also just kind of found it funny that, or not necessarily funny, but interesting that Russell Westbrook ended up coming to the Jazz yet again just to get bought out yet again to pick the team that he wants to play for next. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. How did you feel about Kris Dunn's time with the Jazz? How did you feel about Russell Westbrook's time with the Clippers? If you're a fan of either player, are you happy for them? Are you sad for them? Where do you hope that they end up going for their careers going forward? And I'm always interested with open ears, and I'll respond to you guys as much as possible. With that being said, it's your boy Wraith Hoops. Thanks for watching this video. Go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications, and become a member of the channel, or drop a donation to help support the content. With that being said, good morning, good evening, and good night, no matter where you're on the globe watching. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.